Hi James, hi Alan. It's a quick status update on the Farnboro job because obviously weeks gone by and you haven't seen anything yet. Hit a good point. Now's a good time to be doing this because we've hit a good point where I'm going to need to expand on the brief a little bit. So I'll take you through what I've got so far, what I've done with it and my mindsets behind everything, and if you get me your feedback as soon as you can, that would be really, really useful. So, quick recap. As you will remember, we, well, I don't even need to give you a recap, you know exactly what we did. So let's just whiz through. We've got a flight path which we were initially intending to perhaps chop the 3D model onto, but because of the speed of it, because I wasn't going hell for leather, I was doing more of a scan flight, the actual animation, anything that I lay on, is going to be really tardy and it's going to lack any punch. But that's okay because we've got something up our sleeve which Alan knows about, and James, I think you've seen some examples of this which I'll take you through. So the process that we did was obviously flying whilst taking stills. I've got to stress to you that none of this is actually an automated process. This is all it's all quite long-winded, but I'll take you through it nice and quick because everything's all pre-done. I'm just going to pause the video for 1 second and just load something up and prepare. Won't be a moment. Okay, flew up and down along the site about 4 times, and what we've done is I've fed the information into the relevant software. I've tied the images together because what I need to do is pick out certain points just so that the computer knows, especially with a lot of repeating patterns like this, the computer can tie them all together and we can calculate flight paths and distances and so on. So if we just whiz into here, these are the 4 flight paths all linked together. Every single one of these dots is where a photo was taken in 3D space. So I'll just switch on projection. We can also now see that we calculate the direction in which the shot was taken, and if I switch on the thumbnail and switch those off, and then finally we lay the photos into the scene so that one photo will essentially overlap another one. Now what I'm looking for here is to get the same feature on maybe 3 or 4 photos minimum, and be able to reproject back through the images from the flight path of what we've got. So I might be pausing this as I load the next part, so we'll just bring on the computer positions again. Now what I've done is I took some on-site GPS data, which, to be honest, I should have really walked out a little bit further because obviously the rebar in all of this concrete and the magnetism in all of that metal there has thrown my points just a little bit. But I'll show you the slight error I've got, which I've managed to correct anyway. So the points that I've picked were 3 points here, 2 low spots which I knew were essentially level, and then a point up here which is about 8 meters up, and had them all obviously different in X and Y and Z, which means that I can compute any error in any of my readings quite quickly. So we'll go back into the ray cloud and switch on the first sort of scan of it. If I put in my manual points, as you can see I'm a bit miffed because my data was a little out, but it wasn't too bad because I was able to double check and correct it. So the blue crosses is where I've said the scene was, and the green crosses are where it's calculated. Now as you can see, they don't vary at all in the X and Y, they just vary in that Z depth, which unfortunately has meant that the scene has been cranked over backwards a little bit and is sloping away, but I've been able to correct that. Thankfully, because there's no big X and Y errors, I know that the scene is scaled correctly. So if we have a look at it in plan, we can see that it is, we'll switch the cameras off, we'll see that it's aligned north to south as well, exactly as we'd expect. And just as a point, most of my flights, because I had that 30-meter restriction, most of my flights were focusing on the banks of terraces there, and not much went out to the airfield itself. But right, so once I've done that, if we have a quick look at the photos, What I'm able to do quite easily is get areas of quite high contrast and automatically, I mean the computer will know the difference between blue and green quite easily here, but if we have a look at some of these roofs, you'll notice that we've got a lot of repeating patterns, and it can be quite difficult to track, and especially if we just whiz down substantially further down the project to somewhere like this, you can see that these areas lack any detail for me to sort of hook into, certainly reliably anyway. So some of the flat plane areas just have holes. So what I've done, I've interpolated the point cloud now, and it'll just take a couple of seconds to load. So what I'll do, I'll pause the video whilst that loads. Okay, the densified point cloud really shows us quite a lot of data now. We've got, as you can see, if we look at it at this angle, you can see the scene is raked over where it wasn't anticipating that this was so much higher than down on Gully Road here. You can see that where we took a lot of interest, such as around here, we've got some absolutely fantastic tight point clouds, and then towards the scene edges, or where I rushed through, I can't get enough fixes. I'm looking for at least 4 points just to get the minimum in error. As you can see, I've already filtered out any sky or anything like that, and objects of high reflectance of not much use either. So you, like we said, the roofs of these are fairly sparse because I couldn't get any areas of high contrast, and where we've tried to pick some up, you can see that there are some projection errors. I know that there's some here, for example, where we've missed out, and in actual fact you can see it's dipped into the roof. We know that these are errors, so we can account for those quite straightforward. But we've got some great detail. This is quite an interesting area. You see these hoardings here are perfectly vertical, but this one's raked forward quite a lot, and if you remember from the site, this already had them on this was raked forward. And what you'll notice is as well that behind the railings where the ground dropped off, although we got data in the point cloud, the way that we're interpreting, because all of the shots were filmed from airside back towards the let's just switch on those camera positions. All of it was shot from right to left. Had I shot from left to right, I would have filled in those blanks. But I think we got plenty of data here, especially considering that we were in the air for what, about half an hour, 40 minutes at the most, really. So once I've got my point cloud data like this, and then you're looking, blimey, at roughly 55 million points or so in something like this. You see that over here, for example, it's picked up a structure or a tree which is in front of this Lockheed building, and it's done quite a good job, but then you'll see a small problem with that in a moment, which I'll tell you all about. So once I've got my point cloud, which you're familiar with, I then essentially lay a tablecloth over it. Let's just fatten that up a bit so we can see it in a bit more detail. So this is just an artificial effect just applied to show just a bit of thickness on those points, just to show how the model actually ties together really quite well. So to create a usable article out of 55 million points, I need to mesh it out into triangles. So it's essentially like laying a tablecloth over the top. So if we switch the point cloud off and go into the model, you'll see now that this has filled in those areas, and it has assumed colours out of the photo. Even though it couldn't get a fix, it's modelled it up well enough to assume the colours of these areas. You'll see that we do have some areas and problem areas such as roofs which are caving in. Again, this is down to the fact that we couldn't get a fix on there, and as you can see, because of the repeating pattern on this roof, it's actually confused one line and across and into another, and you can see the way it's split it down. So there's some problems, but nothing that can't be anticipated, and if there's anything particularly wrong, we can see straight away what it is. So I've managed to scale the scene. The handrail issue, as you see, is it's filled in the entire handrail a little bit higher than it needs to be, but if we take the pixel color rather than the scan data, then we know that to be correct. So we've got a lovely model considering, and if we have a look here, got all of the detail in here, including where some people were stood at certain points. So this tablecloth essentially is what I've used in the 3D software. Now this comprises of around about 20 million triangles. If we have a look at that little tree, as you can see, it's detected the hump there, the tree that was there. but it's coloured it with the Lockheed colours, thinking it was part of that building. Again, nothing too critical, but we can see what the issue is there. And then further down here, where we've really been a bit light on data, it's got a few bits that are a bit wobbly, but essentially the scene is entirely to scale. So I'll just switch on a polyline. That line starts from this point here and goes down to this point here. If I select that line, it might take a few seconds to load. So if it does, I'll just pause the video. So we'll select the polyline. Okay, I'll pause the video whilst it loads the relevant data. Okay, it's now loaded up the photos where it can see where this polyline went. If I switch off the mesh, you can see that line, that's hooked up with the GCPs, the ground control point. So this line hooks up from one point on the stand down to the other point on the stand. So we'll switch on the mesh again. So from here to here. And once I've got that line, it's told me that my real terms measurement from here to here is around about 259 meters. It's picked out a few photos where we can see the entire run, so we can see that line is from the handrail there. There is a small curvature on the file, and then we go down to there. As you can see, I've done it as the crow flies, cutting across the barriers. So my projected length is 259. Now, although Google Earth is not the most accurate thing in the world, in areas of high density such as cities and whatnot, they're actually not too bad. In the country areas, they're sampled a lot less. So if we take the same measurement in Google Earth, we'll go from loosely there, and bear in mind I'm not zooming in massively, I'm just doing it fairly loosely. Oh, if we actually click on there to about there, we see we're getting 259.7 meters. That's a bit of an overshoot there, but yeah, 259 meters in both programs tells me that we're pretty accurate over the course of that length. So half a meter over 200, well, nearly 300 meters is minuscule. So then we can now assume that the data within the model, if this lines up, then the data within the model is actually representing at quite high accuracy. There's, like I say, some artifacts where it gets confused between which points are part of what, and this all is because I haven't put enough points, enough checkpoints and enough photos, or I've flown over a little bit too quick and given it not quite enough data to pick up on. You'll see it's picked up the tower, but again it's not picked up the intricacies of the tower because that wasn't part of my point of interest, and it's coloured it accordingly. So we'll go into the 3D modelling software, into here, and we'll come back to those in just a moment. Right, what I've got now, I'll switch these stands off. There we go. Just maximise this. Now, this is a slightly lower resolution preview of only about 2 million triangles. If I select that, you can see how many triangles go in to make this. This is a low resolution one, which can easily be swapped out as a proxy for the high resolution one later. Working with the lower resolution proxy one just makes my frame rates much higher and makes things much quicker for me to work. So we can see we've got slightly messier point cloud data in here, but nonetheless we still have a great to scale 259 meters along that key length, and oops, let's just deselect that. Yeah, 259 meters along that key length, and you can see that it's just downsampled a bit. So I'm not familiar with Farnboro Air Show myself, having never been, so I've done a bit of research, and this is where I want to get a clarification. In my 2D drafting package, I've come up with several stand designs. These are known as massing models, where I take a grid. I take a grid which is conformant to the TSG and standard 5 meter, 2.5 meter squares, and then I've got a 3 meter floor height, 5 meter floor height, and an 8 meter floor height, which is the 5 meter leg plus 3, or vice versa. So I've come up with, if I put some blocks into the visualizing software, you can see that we've got, let's have a quick look at this. I've started to block out some of this so we can just check. And this is a 15 meter deep, 20 meter long and 5 meter high stand sitting there. So most of them are 15 meters, but with the exception of some of the, we just want to switch that off. Some of these here which step out by another 2.5, and you can see some of them are actually really quite narrow. Now, I've popped in a few of the stands, which I've done as massing models, and we've got little cubic ones, say 20 by 20. We've got big long 50-meter ones, and I've just massed these in there at the moment so we can see it populating. Nothing. Let's just switch that safe frame off. There we go. So we've just got a little bit of detail. I've repeated them here, but also these marquees, which when I've done a bit of research on what Farnboro is, this is the shot from the back, everything seems to be the same. It's kind of a crazy, marquee show, which these don't, other than this Thales building and this BAE one at the front here, maybe one down here, none of these seem to be really custom built. They're sort of these giant ridged marquee things. So what I need to know in terms of the brief is, are we going to provide an option of interspersing these with some proper buildings? Are we going to replace all of this altogether? Because I don't want to start making promises that you guys have to keep later on. So although I've designed up several, let's have another look at another one. There we go. That's another little cubic one. This one's crazy, but this one has a couple of viewing decks, viewing platforms, and so on and so forth. We've got a 5-meter viewing platform there, and then a further 3 taking up to 8, and I imagine this to have railings around and having a viewing deck at the top there. But again, sexy buildings is what it's all about, rather than these great big sort of just uniform ridged marquee features. So using the 3D images here, I've looked into things like line of sight. You can see that I've leveled the scene out there, so we are now working on a level site plan, and these are 8 meters tall. So the viewing platforms up on the 3rd terrace. One further point to note is that because we've only got that scanned, what I did, I took some screen grabs of Farnboro and popped it down as a ground plane. There's no detail to that, it's just screen grabs, but it is useful for being able to see lines of sight. So if we're stood on one of these stands and in there, let's just get the 3D mouse out and do some gentle pans, we can see that our line of sight, if we restrict ourselves to about 8 meters in height, our line of sight from the airfield back is actually quite fair. We can see that nobody's butting in front of anyone else. These ones on the front are obviously static and fixed, and then I've put a couple of marquees. Don't worry about the heavy shadow areas because I'm not really, I haven't really lit it in there. So really I just need to know, what is it that we're exactly promising? Are we promising a selection of buildings that we can say, right, there's a 50-meter premium one for someone that's enormous, there's another one that's identical but customizable, there's a smaller one with 2 hospitality areas, 2 viewing decks, there's a slightly bigger one, and there's a crazy one with balconies and sort of walk-through paths and things like that. So once we can populate that, it's quite straightforward to do a build animation. Now I've got a saved camera track in this, so we take it back to frame 1, and what I've got is the camera tracking along. Bear in mind, this is the low resolution mesh of the site, so we'll play this along, and I've got a camera track which will track along at a much greater speed than my flight. So excuse me, so I'm proposing that we do our little fly past. This is using 1000 frames at 25 frames per second, which gives you a total animation from end to end of around about 40 seconds or so, which to me it seems a little long, but then with all of the detail of everything sprouting up and growing, it's probably about right. As we said, that's coming up to frame 1000 about now. We can obviously hone this, but my flights took a good sort of 4 minutes from one end to the other, and it's not very practical to speed up the footage, because although the camera shots are fairly stable in amongst themselves, the flight path did deviate up and down somewhat, depending on the gusts of wind that we had. It was quite a windy day, so I don't think we're going to be able to overlay the live footage. It would just be horrendously boring. And also we're looking at perhaps a twin proposal, one which removes all of these horrible steels and goes back to green to make it look more attractive, and another proposal which leaves the steels in but then covers them up to make them look a bit prettier. So it's now I need to get a tighter brief from you guys, because there's a lot of money, a lot of effort at stake here, and I don't want to gear you up with an animation that promises the moon on a stick for £5 or something like that. That's a surefire way to get into your bad books. So give me a call on the usual numbers, and perhaps a meeting would help. I'm available to I just want to get this one nailed and knocked out of the park. So yep, give us any feedback that you got so far, and let us know what you're thinking, and yeah, and we'll take it from there. So what I'll do, I'll just close on a final animation, just a little fly around the mesh so you can see what's what. There we go.